Okay, we're a couple minutes into the start time now, so I know people are still joining, but I am going to start the introduction. So I just want to say welcome to everyone and thank you so much for joining us on this webinar today, which is the launch of Doctors in Distress IMG Peer Support Group. My name is Aileen and I'm the communications lead at Doctors in Distress. And I'm here with my colleague Mari. She's just got her camera off at the moment, but she is the operations manager. And on the screen today, you'll also see Amanda, who is the founder of Doctors in Distress. I'm going to hand over to him in a little moment, and he'll tell you a bit more about the charity and what we do here. And I'm also with Ananta, who is a trustee of the charity. And she's going to be chairing our guest speakers, who are Arun and Raphael. They are all IMGs themselves, so they're going to be talking a little bit about their own personal experiences and answering some questions towards the end as well. And we're also here with Viv and Fiona, who are two of our brilliant group facilitators, and they are going to be facilitating the reflective practice sessions of this program. So the way the program is going to work is it's going to be, this is all explained in the Eventbrite, but just to give you a bit of a reminder, it's going to run alternative weeks. So one week will be a practical session with a guest speaker, and the following week will be a group reflective practice session where you will have the chance to discuss your own experiences and share stories with peers, and they will be facilitated by Viv, Fiona, and potentially another couple of facilitators if we have enough numbers. So just today as well, if you do have any questions, please do pop them in the Q&A feature of the webinar, and you can leave the chat open, or I'll leave the chat open for any comments as well. We will be keeping you up to date. I know this program is not quite finished being planned, but we will keep you up to date with all the sessions by sending weekly emails via Eventbrite to keep you up to date and send you the Zoom links for them as well. Okay, so just before we get started, we do have a poll that I've created just to capture a bit of information about yourselves. It's all anonymous, so please don't worry about that. But if you could just answer, it'll take just a few seconds, just answer a few questions before we get started. That would be great. So I'm just going to open that poll. So if you just take a couple seconds just to answer those questions, and then we can get started. Perfect. Got lots of answers coming in, so I'm just going to keep it open just for another minute or so. Thank you so much. It's very helpful to find out a little bit more about you all. So thanks.
There's a question in the Q&A.
Where you were raised, so where you were born, just to answer that question. Thanks, Viv. Perfect. Okay, well, thank you so much. Great. So Amanda, can I bring you in just to say hello and tell everyone just a bit more about the charity and what we aim to do here?
Certainly, thanks, Aileen. So first of all, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks so much for joining this initial kickoff and hopefully the follow-up sessions as per the program. So as Aileen said, my name is Amanda Sidhu. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medic, I'm just a member of Joe Public, but I founded this charity and still remain one of the trustees. I started this charity about 2.5 or nearly 3 years ago after the loss of my older brother, Dr. Jagdeep Sidhu, and he passed away in November 2018 and very sadly took his own life. I realized very quickly soon after that he probably found himself in quite a lot of personal and work-related difficulties, and obviously too complex and sort of too intricate to go in here today, but I really understood quite quickly that he, as well as many other doctors and maybe individuals on this webinar today, felt very, very alone and isolated. So I wanted to start a charity to really raise awareness of not just what happened to him, but to really try and raise the profile of the value of good health for doctors and indeed all healthcare workers. So here at Doctors in Distress, we exist simply to protect the mental health of doctors and healthcare workers, and we try and do that using various means. One of these today is, these support groups that which hopefully you'll see some benefit from, and I really urge everyone to participate fully. My thanks also to the Wesleyan for helping support today's webinar. I think without their help with this really wouldn't be going ahead. So again, I'd really urge everyone to use this as best as they can. But just quickly going back to Doctors in Distress, we're a charity that really wants to try and indeed promote the value of good health for doctors, good mental health for doctors particularly, and also make sure that doctors primarily just don't feel alone and have the right support mechanisms and really as many resources as they can to make sure that they're able to protect themselves, to be better doctors and to have better patient outcomes as well. So I'll maybe just sort of stop them and pause there and hand it back to Aileen. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Amanda. So now I'm just going to introduce Ananta, who is one of our brilliant trustees at the charity, to tell us a bit about yourself, what you do, and your experience as an IMG.
Thanks, Aileen. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ananta, and I'm a psychiatrist by professional background, a child and adolescent psychiatrist, and I currently work in the West Midlands in an area called the Black Country. Some of you might be familiar with it. And it's a collection of towns which surround Birmingham. And that's where I'm based currently as the Chief Medical Officer of something called an Integrated Care Board and Integrated Care System. These are new NHS structures, and some of you might be familiar with this language and some of you might still be figuring out what this means, just like I myself am actually, and quite a lot of us are, because these have been established very recently. But to come back to the program today about the IMG support groups and Doctors in Distress, I'm very proud to say that I am an international medical graduate, and it's a strange combination, a wonderful combination, in that I came to this country many years ago. So I came over 25 years ago to the UK, so not new anymore, an established person in the UK, a British citizen. But the memories of what brought me to the UK and my first days in the UK are very fresh. So there is this strange juxtaposition for me of what felt like to be a new IMG in the country and what it is like today after several years here. So just to take you back on how I got to the UK and what it was like then. So I grew up in Mumbai, or Bombay, as I still refer to it sometimes, in India, and that's where I'm from. So I was an Indian citizen then, and I had spent, over 25 years in Bombay. I was born in a South Indian state of Andhra Pradesh. So within India, I was born in the south of India, but I didn't live there. My parents migrated to Bombay for work, and I was raised there and went to school there. Did my medical degree over there at a place called Grant Medical College. Some of you might know about it in Bombay, a JJ group of hospitals. And I also did my post-graduation there in psychiatry. I was aware right from the beginning that I wanted to specialize in psychiatry, and I did that. After having worked for a year or so in India, in a public hospital, so all my work was in a government hospital, my studies and my work. There were friends of ours in the UK, at the time, people, our seniors, our registrars, when we were training, my husband and I were training, that who had settled in the UK and who started talking to us about possibly coming to the UK. Now, this was not something which I had thought about previously or had planned as part of my career move to go abroad. But one of the things that for me was a hook at the time was that I wanted to specialize in child psychiatry, which wasn't available to me very readily there in India. And so after having done my post-graduation in psychiatry, I thought that this might be a way of coming to the UK and specializing in a branch of medicine which I was becoming increasingly interested in and which I wanted to continue to work in. So that's how I came to the UK. In those days, we had something called the ODTS, Overseas Doctors Training Scheme. Again, there were quite a few schemes which were about short-term contracts in the UK. So it wasn't part of a long-term training scheme. It wasn't something which would enable me to take my exams and pass out straight away. I had to enter another training scheme after coming here, but it was a way of entering the UK and being in a training post. So that's how I came to the UK many years ago. And I came to the same place where I'm today, working as a chief medical officer. I came here as an SHO in those days, senior house officer in Wolverhampton in England. And I started working in one of the hospitals here, New Cross Hospital. Now, it was a mixture of trepidation. I think I was terrified, actually. I was also terrified about some very practical things, like, of course, leaving family. I'd never been out of the country, but also taking a flight, which I'd never done before. I'd never sat on an aeroplane. And I didn't know how to buckle my seatbelt on the aeroplane. I had to ask my neighboring passenger as to how that was done. And I just didn't have a clue how I would actually, fare on the flight, whether I would be okay with it and whether I was traveling on my own. So those were some very practical considerations. And when I landed here in the UK, of course, what hit me, I came in November, exactly 27 years ago, and what hit me literally like a wall was the cold wind which buffeted every part of the airport. And I didn't want to get out of the warmth of the airport and make the journey from the airport to the hospital where I had my accommodation. So that's how I started. Now, I can't say that it was easy in the beginning. I felt very confident as a doctor. So there were these very two contradictory halves of me. I felt very confident as a doctor, but obviously very, very underprepared and unfamiliar with the NHS. So I had this confident part and this very scary part. And I was trying to, I suppose, find a balance between the two. It wasn't easy. But what I think I have found over the years, and what I would like to say to all of you, is that you just need one person, one person you can identify with at your place of work, or even maybe somebody outside work, who is there as a constant support, non-judgmental, available person who believes in you and who is willing to steer you through whatever comes your way, whether it is a personal setback, professional setback, or even something complicated. It need not be an issue or a problem, but something which, takes time to learn, etc. So I found that having, one or two people like that around me really helped me to settle in. What helped me over the years, which I didn't have initially, was belonging to a network, being part of a group and meeting people, a large group of people who are in a similar situation to mine, and talking to them about what they had faced and how the situation was similar or different for each of us, and how it is we could support each other. I remember I felt the happiest when a couple of days after I'd landed, when I was still trying to figure out how to use. So, for example, I didn't know how to use a tin opener, and I was given all this access to the kitchen, and I didn't know how to make use of half the appliances there. And I looked, I'd never seen a tin food can before, can of food. So there was, while I was trying to figure out how I cook in an unfamiliar place, one of my most treasured moments was when one of my colleagues from India invited me to his home and I had home cooked food. So do not underestimate the value of home cooked meal, or sounds or smells or memories of where you come from, your home, what you consider your home, and how a glimpse of that or a small exposure to that can really make a big difference in making you feel at home in a country. So these are some of my earlier impressions. I'll stop there and I'll call Arun in next. And then as we continue our conversation, we can hopefully share what happened over the years. But this is how I began my life in the UK. So Arun, how was it for you when you first came?
Thank you, Ananta. And thanks for this opportunity to speak and to share my own experiences as an IMG. Like you, I must say I'm proud to be an IMG. So how did I land up here? Unlike you, Ananta, I think I came towards the latter part of my career in psychiatry. So I was born in the state of Kerala in the south of India because my dad was, he was in the judicial services, so he traveled a lot. So spent a large part of my childhood traveling across the north of India, Manipur, Assam, Delhi, and then finally landed up in Madras, what's now called Chennai. But then I did the end of my schooling, I did that in Kerala, did my medical college again in Kerala, trained in psychiatry in NIMHANS, and then I started to teach at one of the medical colleges in Kerala. I rose to become the head of the department of psychiatry there. So a lot of people then ask me this question, why did you leave that? Why did you come here? And it's a question that I keep asking myself. And I think the answer that I had then, and I think it remains the same now, is that life was extremely busy there. Extremely busy to the tune that, you know, my daughter hardly saw me. My teaching, research, and then a bit of private practice took up a large part of my time. So that was one. And the second was my daughter, she was in her, she was just about to finish school. So we thought she might have a better opportunity if we came here. I was fortunate in that the Royal College at that point of time were looking for consultant psychiatrists. So I got into an equivalence program and I came here as a consultant. I was 50 when I came here. So that's not, and it's not an easy age to come. I came with my daughter and my wife and my daughter. So I also have the responsibility of trying to help them to settle in. So if you ask me about my journey as an IMG, I'm looking at the I in the IMG. So I came in as an international medical graduate. I had a bit of an identity crisis after I came here, and I'll tell you a bit about that. That's the second I. And the third is, I'd say, the integrated medical graduate, which I hopefully am at the moment. The identity bit is you come in as a consultant and you think that you know psychiatry, but then coming here is not about knowing psychiatry. It's about learning medicalese. So I came here and I landed up, and then I had to decipher what CMHT meant, what a CPN meant, what do you mean by a triage, and what do you mean by a CPA? So lots of medicalese to try and understand. And also, very different legal care systems, social care systems. So I had a bit of a crash course. The other bit was, my daughter, she had just finished school, and she did have difficulties integrating in with the school here. But bless her, she did okay. So there was all of that anxiety, and also things like driving. So I came here and I thought, can I drive? And a friend of mine, a colleague of mine said, buy a car and drive. So I bought a car and I drove. And then, my friend was sitting beside me, said, do you realize that you're driving at 50 on a 70-mile road? And I was dead scared of, reverse parking and parallel parking. Anyway, one learns all of that. So a lot of things to try and learn. But I'm happy to say that I've had good support. I currently work, and I started work here in Sussex, continue to work in Sussex Partnership, live in a little town in the south of England, where I always tell my daughter this joke, that when we came here, she said, oh, we're going to England. And then she landed up in this little town in the south of England. And I think we disappointed her a bit, but she's okay. So that's my journey here. And I'll talk more about it as we go on.
Fascinating. Yes, I'm waiting to hear more about it. And Raphael, I'm waiting to hear from you. And I'm sure everyone about how you started off in your IMG journey.
Yeah, thanks as well for having me here. So I am originally from Nigeria, all right, and I was born in Nigeria and then moved to the US and started school there, and then returned to Nigeria. And so I did my medical undergraduate in Nigeria. I did my postgraduate in Nigeria, and I qualified as a consultant in 2008 in Nigeria. And just, I mean, similar to Arun, like people ask, why did you leave? Because I think I was working in Lagos. Lagos is the former capital of Nigeria, and I mean, the busiest part of Nigeria, and in the biggest teaching hospital in the country, arguably. And I think I rose quite quickly, okay? And I mean, the hospital management saw me as one person who could, you know, really ascend. And then all of a sudden, I just had this feeling that I needed to see something else. So for me, it was, yeah, I had gotten to a point where I thought, what else? What did I need to, you know, I want to achieve something else, try something different. Part of that also came from realizing that, I mean, life is quite short, okay? Just like Amandip, in 2015, I realized that we didn't have a suicide prevention strategy in the country. So I started something, and which has grown. And initially, people were reluctant in the hospital to support it until we lost a pediatric surgeon. She ended her own life, and that was really shocking for everyone. And so the organization started, and it's grown beyond the hospital and is a national thing now. And so I understand how, you know, when someone, at the time, we have what's called an organization, association for all consultants. Okay, and I happen to be the chairman for that organization, okay, that association, which included all specialties. And this was someone I had seen a couple of days ago, and there was nothing, you know, to tell me that this lady was struggling and that she was going to, I mean, you know, so it came as a shock. And after that, I said, you know what, I want to try something, you know, just live your life, try, you know, I've always been reluctant to leave Nigeria. Most people expect me to go back to the US, family is there and everything. I said no. So that's how I heard about the MTI program by the Royal College. And so it's meant to be a 2-year program, okay? I applied and I was rejected. They said I was too qualified. So I tried again and then I got in. I just wanted something different. And coming over, I thought, okay, yeah, 2 years and I'm going back home. And then, so I had no intention of staying because I didn't think I could stay. And so just like you, the first thing that hits me is the weather and everything. And I think what worked for me was having that one person, like you mentioned, who believed in you, okay? And so I came in and I was lucky. So I'm in the Northwest, in Lancashire. So I work for Lancashire and South Cumbria NHS Foundation Trust. So luckily there was another IMG who was an associate medical director. And when I got in, it was put in an accommodation. So the trust supported in that regard. Just like you, I was confused. What next? You know, I've not left my country in ages. And he has a 1-hour conversation with me and tells me straight away, look, I've looked at your CV and I think you'll be of value here. I don't know if you plan on going back, but I think you would make sense here. So that gave me a sense of acceptance, you understand? And it made me feel, oh, I could add value. I could, you know, and that's the first time I actually thought, okay, maybe let's see how it goes. And all through the other people I met where I was based, they were quite supportive, IMGs as well. So one acted more like a sort of buddy. Okay, and that really also helped me to settle in. I struggled with the finances was one thing that I struggled with. Not having money, but now I come from Nigeria. I could have 200,000 on me, and that's no big deal in my pockets. To now come to somewhere where £1, you know, carries that much, I struggled with appreciating value of, you know, these smaller currencies. And I found that it was, I would go somewhere and not expect, you know, to be given change, because I can't remember when last I held a coin, because it had, you know, the value. And that was something I found very strange, that I struggled with. I think what helped in the end was I said, you know what, no cash. So use the card. I think that helped me gradually begin to value and respect the pound. So that was one thing. The other thing was I was already married, had my kids, so I came alone. And then COVID comes along. And so I'm in this, I thought they'd come before COVID. So I'd moved into a big house, expecting them to come. COVID comes, they can't come. I'm stuck in a big house alone. You know, and that was a bit of a struggle. Thankfully, I came on the MTI program with a couple of other doctors, okay? Some from Nigeria, some from Egypt, some from India. And so what we did early on was to have sort of meet on weekends to support each other. And I think that really, really helped. So even after that, we kept in touch, so it didn't feel so lonely. The other thing, just before I wrap up, was one thing I learned was, which I think helped me, was you need humility, the need to be humble. Because a couple of, I had friends back in Nigeria asking, how do you leave your consultant, you're coming to do an MTI? For those who know MTI, it's the junior doctor post, so like CT3. And they're like, how? You know, but for me, I found it was an experience. I realized that you needed to be humble first. And so the first time I got onto I decided to join the junior rota, which people found strange as well, because we didn't have to as an MTI. But I did, because the moment I said, okay, I would stay here, I realized that my training was completely different from here. Joining the junior rota would give me some idea what they go through. And it was a worthwhile experience. Racism, growing up in the US, funny enough, I never faced racism, okay? And then one of the first clinics I ran with my clinical supervisor, a lady tells me to go back to where I'm coming from. You know, that was the first experience it came as a shock. I was like, oh, where's this coming from, you know? And she was quite racist, and it hit me. I was there with a medical student from one of the universities who was also from BAME background, and she was also racist towards him. But what struck me, and for me at the end, I think it was overall a positive experience. Why? The British consultant who was my clinical supervisor came to our defense immediately and said, no, we won't. The trust has zero tolerance for this. If you will not see this person, you can leave. And that really made me feel, you know, reassured. And the patient left, eventually came back to see me, but I felt, so in the end, it would have been negative, but for that, you know, someone standing up for you. So it's a journey still. So I've left the MTI program. The trust offered me a specialty doctor position, and in 2020, offered me an acting consultant position. Because I was already senior, I decided to go through the Caesar route, and so that's what I'm pursuing. So it's been, things are evolving, but so far it's a positive experience. I still can't wrap my head around people greeting you without saying words. Where I come from, you say something. You don't just smile at people to greet them, but I'm learning that. So that's me.
Excellent. And so many nuggets there. I mean, apart from, you know, things that you've spoken about how that somebody standing up for you, or somebody supporting you, or meeting over weekends, these little things that make such a big difference, little and big things. But also, I think some of the things that you touched upon, and Arun as well, might form topics for future IMG groups, Ellen, when we are thinking of what we can organize, as part of this IMG session, whether it is about how do we challenge or stand up to discrimination, how do we get help with things like finances, settling in, how do we do some practical things like driving or managing without a car. Those are some of the things that occupy all of us to a very great degree when we first come to the country. So I think good pointers there. And from what you were saying, Raphael, I just remembered that when I first came to this country, one of the things I had to really stop myself from was being informal with patients, physical. Especially I was working with children. In India, I was used to sort of, it was part of the culture where you would sort of, maybe lead them in by the hand or ruffle their hair times or whatever it is, do some things which were considered part of normal culture and greeted children. And I realized how different it was here. So I had to unlearn quite a few of my ways of social interaction. And I think there were times when by default, I would, just in the first few months of coming here, it was very tempting to sort of switch into Hindi or, one of the regional languages in India while greeting people, and only to sort of realize, oh gosh, I need to speak in English. I need to say hello and say ho when you're meeting someone. So, those things have stayed with me. Great stuff. So Arun, what happened after the initial settling in period? I gather, I think we've got till half two, is that right, Aileen? So I was thinking if you just spend a couple more minutes, Arun and Raphael, if there are any things, and then we can pick up some questions from the Q&A afterwards. So Arun, what was it like after the initial phase of settling
in? After you sort of learn the ropes, I can call it, it is then about trying to see where you want to head. What you actually want to do within the trust, and then to try and gain that. So I went on to do, my interest was in medical education, went on to do a master's in that. I was able to get into the management in medical education, spend some time there. And I must say that the advantage of being in this country has been that you can sort of move horizontally. So when I say that, I've moved out of medical education into groups and running balance groups and analytic groups and reflective practice groups. So then I'd just like to say something that I think has helped people, and then about this. So currently what I do is I run a group, a reflective practice group for international medical graduates who come into our trust. And it's a rolling group, which means we keep people coming in. But the consistency of that group, which has been running for 2 years, it's a group where people actually talk about, I'm so scared about parallel parking, or how do I start a bank account, to what do I do when my consultant is slightly rude, and how do I tell them that this is so. And these are middle grade doctors, these are essays doctors who are in the group. And some of the themes that have come up have been around power and power dynamics. It's been about communication. How do you actually tell people, or how do you receive the information? And the group is sort of bonded. So as a group, they feel supported. They look forward to the next group because they've got issues. They also bring cases in, talk about themselves in the case rather than about the diagnosis and things like that. So I feel that if there had been an ongoing support for people who come in, rather than just the trust having an induction program and then letting you go, if there's something ongoing, that would help, I think.
Yeah, no, that's so true. I think, along those lines, one of the things that are really people have to get used to, I think, is, that they are not expected to be superhuman just because they've made the transition to the country and, they're an IMG. It's not as if they always have to perform at their best, be at the best, be able to do everything at the first go, not make any mistakes. There's such a temptation, the pressure that we put on ourselves, and also something to prove to others. And if you're facing discrimination, all the more you feel you've got to really sort of show to people that you're good, very good. So I think dealing with failure, in exam failure, for example, that's a big part of the anxiety. What happens when you fail for the first time? You fail a driving test, you fail a medical exam. And those are some of the things I think IMGs have to come to terms with. But certainly what I have realized is you can fail, you can take a break. So I started my career development very late because I had children, I grew my family, and I really took a back seat to work part-time. But even if you take a break, even if you pause, even if you fail, you can still continue on the journey that you want. If you're kind to yourself, and if there are people who value you for who you are and support you, you can actually make of your career what you want. So I think those are lessons I learned maybe after 20 years, but certainly something that I felt would be good to share here. Right. Can we pick up the questions now? Let me just check.
Yes, of course. Are you able to see the questions, Ananta?
Yes. So is the first question about how to reduce anxiety during first on call? Right. I mean, anyone can take that. Raphael, would you?
Yeah, because I was anxious, not having done first on call in over decades and now having to do that. So what helped me was, first of all, I would say, shadow someone. The value of shadowing really, really helped me. And what I did was to shadow an IMG, okay, who was already in the trust. And the reason why that was of value was someone who had similar, training, undergraduate training experience as I had. Without me saying things, the person knew that I would probably need to know this, knowing where I'm coming from. It's different from shadowing someone who was trained here, okay, who will assume that your experience as an undergraduate is the same as theirs. So I would advise the person to shadow at least twice, okay? Preferably you can identify an IMG who's already on the rota. The second thing is prepare for it, okay? Don't underestimate the value of good sleep before you go for that first on call, okay? And if you could, some trusts have the one where you'd first buddy someone, okay? That also helps. So those were the things that are helpful for me in psychiatry, because first on call is mostly physical health that you have to deal with. So if you're psychiatrist this person is into as well, I would say just brush up on physical health, common physical health things, so that you're prepared. That's it. That will help reduce the anxiety. That works for me anyway, especially the shadowing.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things is that we expect IMGs to have a period of settling in before they're put on call, so we should, hopefully you have support to speak up. If you're put on call in your first week or first 2 weeks without even having been able to settle into your trust of the NHS, then that's something that you should guard against and be able to speak up. I think now there are mechanisms in your trust as well as in the Royal Colleges, etc., or the deanery, where you can say, this is happening and this doesn't feel right. And also don't be afraid to contact your consultant or your next person on call. Sometimes there are 3 tiers of on call. Sometimes it's a trainee and a consultant. Sometimes there is an SAS doctor in between. So when you do your first on call, even at any time, if you're unsure of something, please do ring up the next person on call, the next senior person on call, and say to them that you want to run something past them. You wanted to check whether this was okay. You're not sure about this. You weren't quite sure what. So, those are ways in which you can make sure that you're doing whatever is within your control when you're first on call, when you do your first on call. Yeah. So, gosh, quite a few questions coming in. So the next one is hi, I want to ask why it is very common now to downgrade the IMG doctors. So I'm not sure whether this is something that you feel is happening generally or specifically to you. But Arun, any thoughts about what people might feel, could be downgrading an IMG doctor, and how people would respond if they felt that they were? Is it in terms of grading? I'm not sure whether it is to demote them in a way. Is that what is being referred to?
That question is asking about whether it is.
Sorry to interrupt. If the person who asked the question would like to post it in the chat or to just give some more detail on the Q&A, then please do. Happy to answer that if you're happy to elaborate.
So Arun, can we come back to that question when we have some more details? So the second question, either Arun, Raphael, can you give any ideas as to how to find a job in the hospital while preparing to sit the PLAB exam? We do get many queries around this, isn't it? So, I mean, one of the things that we do is if you are able to be a part of a network, nowadays people are offering as part of induction within the trust or a part of the GMC induction or a Royal College induction, if you're coming through the MTI route, to put you in touch with networks. Either they are networks of doctors originating from your part of the world, or they are networks of MTIs, for instance, or networks of those who have passed the PLAB exam. And in those, there are contacts where people are able to tell you about which of the hospitals are able to offer attachments, clinical attachments or observerships, or even if you've passed your exam and you're waiting, for your certificate, final permanent certification, what are the jobs you can do. So being connected with networks or seniors or more senior IMGs from your part of the world will tell you what options are available. However, you also have every right to go to your own trust HR department or where you're hoping to work, which part of the country that you're interested in, of approaching some of the HR departments and asking them about possibilities, whether it's about clinical attachments and observerships, etc., that you can do before you pass your PLAB exam. So it might not be a job, because if you don't have registration, you can't work as a doctor, but you will certainly be able to collect the required experience around observing, etc., so that when you do apply for jobs, you then have some experience of observing and shadowing and doing an attachment in the NHS. The next one is, can we talk about institutional racism, especially weaponized referral to the GMC, which, like the KKK, is there to make black and brown doctors know their place? Now, that's quite I think there's a lot we can discuss around racism and institutional racism. As Mari said, I think it's going to be covered in one of our future workshops for IMGs, isn't it? So I won't be able to do justice to it in the minute or so that we have. But one of the first things to say is that it is now being taken very seriously at the levels of trusts and organizations, by the GMC, by Health Education England. By no means are we where we want to be. And there are some areas of good practice which are better than others, and some areas where institutional racism is much more embedded. I think the most important thing is, the leadership in the organization, whether it is the medical director or director of medical education or board members, they have a responsibility. So one of the things that would be good to know when you first start in an organization is, who are your leaders? Who are the people who represent you in these various forums, and what is being done about racism in your area? And if something doesn't feel right in your trust, you have recourse either through your deaneries or through your tutors or through the Royal Colleges or through your trainee support networks to talk about it. And many hospitals, all hospitals should have guardians of safe working, for instance, for trainees, where they are able to raise concerns, or trainees forums where they are able to raise concerns. So at the level of trainees, when you first come to the UK as an international medical graduate, either as a clinical fellow or teaching fellow, these are the forums where you would first raise concerns, but it requires much more elaborate discussion, and it will happen in one of the future IMG webinars. How much time have we got? There are a lot of questions to go through.
Yeah, just if we just do a few more minutes on questions, but can I just bring in Amanda and then Raphael just to
Sure.
answer?
Yeah, thanks. So, sorry, I'm just really glad to hear that we've got a dedicated session on GMC and racism, because it is a very, very important issue. Just to add to what Ananta said beautifully, is in recent months, I've actually looked at this myself and been privy to certain conversations and forums where this is being discussed more openly. Just as a reminder for those that don't know as well, the GMC is there to regulate doctors and protect the public, which is actually their primary goal. So although it is used as a weapon, or and I'm quoting here as a weapon, that's not certainly my view, but the GMC, just to reassure everyone and the people that I've spoken to within the GMC, they know this is an issue. they want to change and evolve their cultures and behaviours. So it is very, very much on their radar. So I just wanted to just add that assurance to in addition to what Ananta said.
Yeah, no, that's true. And just before I bring Raphael in, the responsible officer in an organization is the one through which the medical referrals are channeled when they go to the GMC. He or she doesn't always have to be involved in the referrals, but they will be made aware of all referrals and they will be the one liaising with the GMC. So really important to know what the stand and what the values of the responsible officer are when dealing with these concerns, because at an institutional level, that's the way you can begin to challenge some of the racism or the institutional discrimination around GMC referrals. Raphael.
Yeah, I just want to say that aside from besides the official, ways of addressing and tackling this, I think the informal support is really key as well, around the issue of discrimination, inequality, and all of that. And we've, in my trust, we've started what's something called the change chain. And I could send that to Aileen. It might be something people might find useful and could apply in their different bases as well. So it's an informal support arrangement that helps to, address these issues. All right.
Thank you. Very important points. And Ellen, please do let me know if anyone has their hand up amongst the panelists, but I'm going to the next question.
I will. If you want to move on, I think we've got time for a couple more and then I'll just bring Vivian in.
Yeah, so the next one is so I'm just taking it in chronological order, so I appreciate we might not answer everyone, but we'll get back to them with any responses. My biggest fear is getting into a training program, neurosurgery, graduated 2020, passed OET and MRCS Part A, MRCS Part B, OSCE coming May 2023. CV is very poor, no research, audit, etc., only conferences and courses. My question is how to overcome being overqualified and enter in surgical training. And is it easy to work on the CV with work? So do Raphael or Arun, do one of you want to pick this up about how do you, when you first come into the country, build up your CV and what is it that you can do in terms of audit and research? Especially if you feel you're overqualified or you're very experienced.
And I think both Raphael and myself did feel that when we came in. But I think it's very important to try and do courses here. When I say a course, I don't mean necessarily completing your master's, but it's about doing courses in this country. And I think that builds up your CV and your contacts much better than the experience or the certificates that you might have in your own country of training. And that's not to discount the experience that you might have gained in your own country. That will come in useful as a part of your day-to-day professional work. But I think for acceptance and for people to know the value of your work, it's important to be integrated into a course or into a workplace here. Raphael, I don't know whether you had something more to add.
I want to say that I totally agree with you with the courses, but I don't want to take it for granted. I mean, whoever asked that question, you may have already done this, but I think you need to really get your CV to work for you. All right, and by that I mean overqualified. But how does what you consider being overqualified, add value to the job you're applying? You need to make sure that your CV speaks to that, because it's not a problem to be overqualified if you can prove that being overqualified, I mean, that is actually an advantage, not a disadvantage. So I don't want you to see that as a disadvantage. And like Arun said, there are several courses online. Do the NIHR. That would be a good place to start from, because the fact that you've actually done the course and reflected on it is showing evidence, some competencies in research and audits. Yeah.
Thank you. If we just do one more question, Ananta, and then we'll try and get back to you. If we've not answered your question, I'm so sorry. There's loads coming in, or these might be questions that you're able to ask at future sessions within the program as well. So hopefully we'll be able to get an answer one way or another. Thank you.
We should be able to collate all of them, and if they're not answered as part of future courses, so we get back to them. Before I move on to the next question, which is really important, and I want to spend some time on that, maybe a couple of minutes, regarding audit, research, etc. You know, this is the kind of thing that your director of medical education or your tutor or your supervisor should be able to help you with, as to what are the things you can get involved in regarding audit. Even when you're doing an attachment, sometimes you can take part in audit if it doesn't involve directly getting patient identifiable information. So there are ways in which you can do that even during your clinical attachments. But certainly after you've started a post, whether it's a clinical fellow or trainee or whatever as an IMG, you can ask your supervisors and tutors and directors of medical education to help you do a relevant audit or even get involved in a research project. Coming to the last question we are dealing with today is about loneliness. And somebody has put in an extremely important question about working in a remote place and not having any family or friends around. And is there any good way to cope with loneliness? And I'm so glad whoever has put this question, firstly, thank you for asking this. And secondly, I can understand how it must be for you. So, you know, if you want any further directions or further help after this webinar, please do send an email to Doctors in Distress. And based on your particular situation, we can try and put you in touch with relevant people. But I think the first, there isn't any one answer to this question, but certainly as part of, support program, when you first come into an organization, within your trust or within your service or within your team, whether it is your IMG champion or a tutor, supervisor, mentor, there are ways in which the organization themselves can put you in touch. They can buddy you up with somebody who has been there for a while. So they are there for you to make contact with and get to know people and look at what the various ways of getting involved in any activities are, either within the organization or as part of groups, clubs outside. Even in remote places, it might begin with something which is virtual in the beginning, where you can interact with people further afield. But certainly a mentorship induction or a supportive enhanced induction for IMGs would normally include asking about your personal situation and something about your pastoral care, which would enable people to put you in touch with somebody like a buddy. Even having a mentor. Now, mentor is not somebody who is exactly going to dispel loneliness, but what they really do is just help you to process and make sense of where you are in your life in terms of your personal life and career, and ways in which you can do something about it or use your interests or your strengths to reach out in some way, and for them to support you in a very non-judgmental way at all times and provide guidance rather than directing you or being prescriptive. But beyond your place of work, there are quite a few diaspora, what we call diaspora organizations. So depending on which part of the world you come from, there might be an organization already in the UK. For example, I know there is MANSAG for Medical Association of Nigerian Doctors. Raphael, I think there's one. Then for psychiatrists, we have the Association of Black Psychiatrists. Similarly, for those who come from India, we have the British Association of Physicians of Indian Origin. We have APNE, which is the Association of Pakistani Physicians of Northern Europe. And similarly, there are various organizations which are based on geographical places of origin or based on your profession, depending on which subject you're working, which specialty you're working in, there might be some organizations. So there are ways of getting in touch with your diaspora organization that you most identify with, that you would feel more comfortable with, and that you would want to be a part of. And that information should be available either as part of the induction program that you have in your trust or at a Royal College or through GMC or Health Education England. In the Royal College MTI program, for example, we have started giving information about all the diaspora organizations that are available for psychiatrists. This is at the Royal College of Psychiatrists, and I think other similar Royal Colleges are doing the same, putting MTIs and new entrants in touch. I think a problem might arise if you're not part of a training scheme and if you are, say, a clinical fellow, where you might not follow some set routes, but each trust does its own thing about how they employ clinical fellows, etc. But certainly something which should be there as part of your trust induction program as to what it is you can do to get connected with people, to get involved in certain activities, and to build up a network, even in remote places where it isn't very easy to do so. Arun and Raphael, or anyone else, if you want to add anything, please do comment.
I'd like to say three things here, Ananta. One is, I'm presuming that the person who asked the question is talking about loneliness, not in the professional sphere, but in more perhaps after work when you're back at home. And just to let you know that that's a very, very common feeling, that there are other people who might share that same thing. And the most important thing there, I think, is to recognize it, but to reach out, is not to feel alone, because that's one thing. But the loneliness, I think you need to address through reaching out. And I think which stage in your career or in your journey you are here in the UK, I'd like to say that when you come in, you start to notice what's different, because everything is different around you. And then as you progress, you start to know what is the same, what is similar to you. And once you start to notice what's similar, then it becomes easier to reach out to people. And then, like Ananta said, there are so many organizations, so many ways that you can address that.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you all so much. I'm just going to bring in Fiona and Viv at this point, who are two of our wonderful group facilitators, and they are going to be facilitating the reflective practice groups, which will be on alternate weeks of this program. So could both of you, I know you've got something to say as well, Viv, but could you just introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about what you do and how the groups will run, and kind of the importance of having that safe space to be able to discuss with peers about experiences and what the participants are going through.
Oh, well, hi, I'm Vivian. I just wanted to come in on the question about loneliness, because I totally identify with that in terms of my own experience in the NHS, where I moved to a senior position in the NHS in a different part of the UK, a different country, which is where I still am. But for the first years, being a senior person in the NHS, it was very difficult to connect with many different people because of my seniority, and also because I had an English accent, funnily enough. It made a difference where I lived. But I'm not English, and it was very lonely at first. So I can understand how it must be, because you're noticeable by your difference, and it's really, really hard. But what I did, like Ananta said, is I reached out externally from my NHS establishment and networked around friends, made friends locally. But it was hard because they saw me as a foreigner, and I had to get over that. And it must be much harder if you're also a person who doesn't come, if you like, from the UK as a whole. They're coming internationally, and they see you as different. So one of the things that I think is important in the groups that we'll facilitate is the sense of being in a safe enough place over a period of time to share with each other some of those issues that might be bothering you right away now, and to feel safe enough to open up together. And my role and Fiona's role is to help facilitate that, so that you can talk to each other and get ideas from each other and reflect on what's happening and what the differences are for you, and also discover what the similarities are as well, so that you can take some of that away into your own workplaces. I'm just aware that we're going over time, so I look forward to seeing you anyway, whoever's joining my group, and I'll hand over to Fiona.
Brilliant. Thank you, Viv. Fiona, if you could just as well.
Yeah, just to say, I was a midwife before I was a counselling psychologist, and so I've worked in different countries, and I'm from Northern Ireland originally as well. And I think in many ways the conversations that you've been having here are the conversations that would be happening in the group, and it's about sharing together. I think the way that you've got the practical seminars in between to answer much more of the medical stuff, because I think that's really helpful, because I certainly don't have the knowledge, but people within the group, they have knowledge as well. And loneliness and connecting, and that first question about culture, is it where you come from, or is it your ethnicity? I think that's a really complex question, and just the reasons for coming to this country. And racism, unfortunately, is absolutely rife. And as a white person, I'm also aware of that. But I look forward to meeting you all. If you can't come to a session, please come to the next session. because I appreciate that work can be difficult as well, but it's really important to come and to join in. And then you can network together from that group, and that you can start to develop relationships with each other outside, away from the sessions as well.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you both so much. Thank you for being on here. It's really helpful, I think, for participants to meet you before the sessions start. Thank you so much to our guest speakers, Ananta, Arun and Raphael. Raphael had to rush off as well, and Amanda and Mari from the team. So we are due to start on Monday. There has been a bit of a last minute potential change to that, but we'll be in touch via email. I'm just going to pop some details, so the sign up link to the sessions and my email address as well, just in the chat. If you do need to get in touch for any reason, please do, but I hope you're able to attend most of the sessions and you can get a lot out of this program. Does anyone else want to add anything? Sorry, I'm aware we're running over, but does anyone want to add anything just before we jump off?
Just to say that I have taken, we are keeping all your questions, and we will take time to respond to them. If anyone requires signposting or any further information, Aileen's dropped her email address there. We've also got email contact on our website. If we can't answer the question, then we will know someone who can. So just stay in contact with us, and we will support you as much as we can on your journey. So the first step is signing up here. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you everyone, and to all our speakers. That was a great session. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.